Welcome, everyone. I am Craig Fisher. This is Inside Talent. I'm here with Jason Putnam from Plum, and we are doing hot takes from the recent TalentNet live conference, some other things that we've been doing this year, what's coming up. And Jason, how you doing? Great to have you back.
I'm good. I had a week off after your event, so I would like to say I feel rested, which I did, but yesterday I was not rested, going through 700 emails and everything else. But good.
Yeah. The catch up is real. The fatigue it's in. We've had some weird weather here in Texas, and I think it's making me even more tired.
Yes.
Allergy season, all that is going on. So yeah, today, even though it's beautiful out, I'm a little exhausted. And I'm heading to Mexico. Yeah, I'm heading to Mexico tomorrow, and my calendar's just stacked up, so I don't get a break today.
For those who aren't familiar with Texas weather, Craig and I have not been drinking. Our eyes are red because of a thing called cedar fever, and it is brutal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's real. If you want to live in this great state, you got to put up with a lot of barriers to, healthy eye color. All right, so we were at the theater in Austin a week ago. Let's see. Well, it was March 8th. I'll just do that because we don't know when people are going to see this. And Plum was a great sponsor and partner for the TalentNet Live Conference. Your team showed up in a big way. Lots of great people, lots of great interaction, lots of compliments on having you there. It was really good.
Thank you. It was it's a great event. When I go to lots of events and I speak at lots of places, but for me, it's the things I appreciate about it is it's smaller by design, which I appreciate. It gives you time to actually talk. But when I go into this one, and I've been to others that you've put on, is first of all, I'm there to learn, which I did. Secondarily, I'm there to kind of network across the board, which mission accomplished. I was there to speak. And then fourth, we were there, as a sponsor, and it checked all those boxes for sure.
Good. Yeah. Well, and, a couple of things. So, and as you know, at the TalentNet Live Conference, this is always the case. And I kind of set the tone for the event with my opening remarks each time. We're all sort of in this together, right? So there's yes, you might have a vendor table outside the room, but all the vendors are invited to come sit down in the audience. Please do, because that's what, we're all here for. We're all here to learn from each other. And in our room, everyone is a colleague. And I emphasize that because these days, so many of our organizations are hiring customers to help do, growth or customer success or product design. And so, maybe you're a talent acquisition practitioner today, but you might be the next VP of whatever at your favorite HR tech company tomorrow, right? And so we're all in this together to learn from each other. And so at our event, it's a little bit of kumbaya in that regard. And we also acknowledge that there are many people in the room, because talent acquisition is sort of shrinking right now, who are unemployed or underemployed. And that's a real issue. There's a lot of sort of wellness and mental fatigue happening, issues happening around the shrinking talent acquisition space and the ability to get a job. And so I always say that just because you're not working right now doesn't mean you're not still my colleague, right? And so that kind of leads into my idea that job seekers are also our future colleagues, and we should treat them all with such respect.
I agree 100%. And for this specific event and the other ones you've put on that I've been to, there's a level of intimacy, which I alluded to, but there's also a level of trust. And those two things together are great. And if you just, like what you just said is 100% right. I can't tell you the amount of people who have been an analyst, a practitioner, and worked at a vendor.
Right.
One of my good friends is the ultimate decision maker at a Fortune 50 healthcare company. Before that, he ran an HR tech company, and before that, he ran a headhunter and recruiting team. So it's like reputation matters in this industry, and how you treat other people really matters in this industry.
Yeah, and I've had all those experiences, right? I've done all those things. I've been inside, outside. I've been leadership, ownership, all the things, and I expect that I'm no different than anyone else in the regard that I'm trying to improve the field of hiring and employment and recruitment and human resources in general. And I think we all should be striving for that. It's easy when there's turnover in our organizations to say, well, all right, that didn't work because whoever brought in that latest technology or that latest idea or that latest process improvement just walked out the door, and there goes the institutional knowledge, and the next person is going to want to bring their own ideas. But I think in the end, if we strive for excellence and we continue to fight for the best outcomes, we're going to end up in a better place, and that's what we have to keep our eyes on.
And the other thing that I thought I agree 100%. The other thing I thought was really interesting, and no indictment to other events, there always tends to be a theme of the week or a theme of the day, right?
Yeah.
And it's even more niche than, it's TA or TM. It's like Great Resignation, or it's skills. We alluded to that a little bit. Every speaker, every panel, again, I'm there first kind of as a learner, was different. So it wasn't just a regurgitation of a different way to talk about the same topic over and over. And to me, just getting different perspectives, but also talking about different, whether they're very particular niche things people are trying to solve, like high volume. Jim and his panel, D'Amico, did a great job talking about that. But then other people talked about skills. Other people talked about just mental health and taking vacations, like Jackie and John did. And it was a very broad swath of topics covered, which with somebody with pretty severe ADD kept me pretty engaged.
Yeah, I got a lot of good compliments on the short session times as well. So we kind of go back to back 20, 25 minutes per session. And the idea there is we're doing quick hits. You come in with hot takes like we're doing today, right? So if you want to come in and tell a 40-minute story with slides, that's a different thing, right? We've got other events where maybe that happens, but these events, this is what's your best stuff, what's your top 5 things that you want people to know. Even if it's a panel discussion, let's get that out there. And I choose the sort of session topics personally, so I'm very aware of and cognizant of the fact that if I'm bored with it, and like you say, maybe it's the same kind of theme over and over and over again in each session. If I'm bored with it, then everybody else, I'm assuming, is going to be bored with it as well, right? So I've got to I'm entertaining me first, and people tell me, Craig, you've seen too many of these. Maybe other people wouldn't be quite as bored, but I like my repeat visitors as much as I like my new visitors. And we had seemed like 65% new people in the room when everybody raised their hand. And so, I want them to be able to look at videos and sessions from years before and say, yeah, this one was drastically different and new. And so we always get, good compliments that, hey, this is probably the best one ever. Well, we're just striving to be better than the last one.
And that's the other interesting thing that I appreciate was, because you've been doing it so long, because it's intimate, because there's trust, you had people at various stages of their career.
Right.
If we look at like Melissa at Ford, she's a VP level, but it's not just all decision makers at that level. You're also encouraging people earlier in their career, either on the vendor side, practitioner side, influencer, analyst side, to come. So we had people kind of all stages of their career as well, trying to learn from others in different stages of their career. Right? A lot of conferences will say, it's only decision makers, it's only practitioners. That's all great if you're just only looking at it from a lead gen perspective, which is, sure, as a sponsor, we look at that to some extent, but really as somebody who cares about the space, I want to have that diversity of thought across different functions, but also different phases in their career, because somebody who's brand new in their career in TA or at a vendor, they're going to think of things differently than myself with this white beard is going to think about who's been doing it for 30 years.
Uh-huh. So, it's funny. I have run marketing and growth functions at big organizations myself, right? In HR technology and services. And I understand about marketing qualified leads and all the terms we use to say, are we getting ROI out of this? Well, the ROI you can't determine before an event. I mean, unless you've been there and seen it, you can't say, all right, this list looks like there's a lot of analysts or there, whatever. The reality is for me, and what I love is that people who got their start speaking at TalentNet Live are now leaders somewhere else and are sending their teams back.
Yep.
Right at I don't know if it's entry level, but at a recruiter or an admin level or whatever they are. But I've always found that my leads, and right, I'm in this space too. I'm also a vendor as well as a speaker and practitioner and all the things. But my leads come from those people a lot of times. It's the Melissa Thompson, and God love her for continuing to grace us with her awesome presence at these events. She loves TalentNet and TalentNet loves her, but she's too busy to look at every product that comes on stage, right? And so it's going to be somebody that she sends out in the world who brings back a lot of those ideas,
100%.
and right, and partners as well. So we have to remember that everybody in that room has the potential to talk about what a vendor offers because they're constantly talking to the people who are buying. And that's I'm holistic about it. I think I'm right.
Well, I think you're 100% right. This industry, and I've been in multiple industries, right? I run a fintech company where we're selling to people in sales or marketing. It's a different approach. I've run other tech companies. Mm-hmm. What's interesting about this is reputation matters and brand efficacy matters. And this is more of a hot take for other vendors. When we look at spend at events, 50% of it we do not count as ROI for lead gen. We write it to brand. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to spend money on events, I would encourage people to do it the same way, because the traditional approach of just how many leads did I get and what did it cost me per lead, that's one thing that it matters. But if they don't know who you are, the efficacy of those leads is irrelevant. Right? Yep. If the sales rep calls them tomorrow and they have no positive experience with your brand, no experience with your brand, or even worse experience with your brand, right, it doesn't matter how many leads you generated at whatever cost. You have to have a good brand that's respected and liked with integrity, or no matter how many leads you generate, it's not going to work.
So on that topic, let's talk about how we opened up the program, right? I had my opening remarks and then you came on and talked about skills, and we got really great feedback about your presentation. People referenced your presentation all day long, which I love that this happens in other people's presentations during the day, because that means they were listening, right? And so everyone, almost everyone referenced, as Jason said, in their presentation. And I don't script these things. Nobody sends me a PowerPoint ahead of time, so there was no pandering happening. But talk to us a little bit about what your presentation was about and the reactions that you got.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. I take it pretty seriously, and actually, I'm inherently an introvert, so I get incredibly nervous. It's not the first keynote I've done, right? But right. I get incredibly nervous about it. And to answer your question, we talked about a thing called somatic satiation, which is not for our industry, but it's essentially a word that's used over and over so much that it loses its meaning. And in our industry, we realize it happens, but we haven't named it. And it's things like D&I and remote work and gig economy and great resignation and the battle for talent. Or right now, that's skills, right? It was AI 2 years ago, and now it's skills. And it's really lost all its meaning because nobody knows what the heck it means. And kind of the punchline of the presentation was that both from a talent acquisition and talent management perspective, we think we're doing a good job bringing those two together. Right. And I think we are, but the things that we use when we're looking at employees to promote them or say they're doing a good job, outside of just specific performance metrics, or the things that we say why we need to get rid of somebody, things like they're very innovative, they work well with others, they have grit, all those things. None of those are hard skills that appear on a resume. And if they do appear on a resume, nobody's actually putting them on their resume because they're not PhD level IOs. They can't measure themselves. Mm-hmm. So the things that we use to promote people or fire people are vastly different. They're actually completely opposite of how we hire people. So we go through, do you have a college degree? How long did you go to college? Where did you go to college? How much experience do you have? And yet when they get there, most of that becomes irrelevant. Mm-hmm. It's not, I promoted this person because they were a 10 out of 10 in Excel, but Craig, you were only a 9 out of 10 in Excel. Right. So until we can figure out how to use that same level of data and pull that data both backwards into the TA process when it comes to screening people in, but also have that same thread that we can pull through for all of our talent decisions, we're going to be speaking two vastly different languages that don't communicate. So the outcomes are never going to be what we want from an outcome perspective. Mm-hmm. I had some key examples in the presentation that we can share for another day, but that was the gist of it.
Yeah, and the gist was good. The examples were good. Again, a lot of good takeaways. I like the fact that I like this. I like the semantic satiation. I think that's we are overusing skills, right? And Plum's approach to skills is not hard skills. It's not work-based skills only. It's soft skills as well. And I'm a big fan of this. And I think we need to talk about that more in this space. And so we will.
If you think about, like, speaking to individuals who are listening now or later, there's been times you were in a job and you hopped out of bed every day loving that job. And there were times you hopped out of bed in a different job, even though it may be identically the same job, and you didn't hop out of bed excited. That has nothing to do with how well you know Excel or if you know Java or any of that.
That's right.
And it's even less about culture. It's really about, are you using those things that come naturally to you? Because when you use the things that come naturally to you, right? I'm incredibly low in teamwork, funny enough. So if you put me where I have to be around the team 12 hours a day, could I do it? Of course I could do it. Would I high five my wife when I get home, or would I pour myself a drink? I would pour myself a drink. But if you put me in a role where I can be incredibly innovative, I hop out of bed every day. Same job, but those are the things that make people 300% more productive and stay 3 years longer, is they feel fulfilled in the role. And if they're flourishing in their role because they're good at their job and they feel fulfilled, ultimately the business is going to thrive, because if all your employees are 300% more productive and straight 3 years longer, the business can't help but thrive.
Right.
It's just a math equation.
Yeah. And I think it's a sensible thing. And I think, well, we're going to see more of that as we go through this year. I'm a big fan. And so I'll be talking about it.
I think, a lot of times when it's an innovative, and we're innovative, we've been around 11 years.
Yeah.
There's almost this apprehension, as there should be, because a lot of people we sell to are risk adverse. Like, is it too good to be true? Okay, that's fair. But there's also a fear of, if it's that good, I actually have to buy it, which means I have to implement it, which is also a fear that people are experiencing. And it's a lot of times you get the early on adopters, the people who are driven by innovation, who want to make kind of drastic change. And that was a lot of our sale for 9 years and even into 10 years. In the last 6 weeks, we've had 18 enterprise level demos, right? Like, that's a lot. We have a lot of other demos, but those are like 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 person companies who all, when you just said, we're going to go more there, I think we're at this tipping point where people, are on the edge of the cliff and they're just waiting for this push. And they either don't know it's available, they don't know how, or they're scared to do it. But I feel this kind of, and it's not just specific to Plum, I feel this level of, the world can be different now. And like, we're slammed with people having those conversations with us.
Yeah. And I love that that's happening. And that gives me great hope, because my team at TalentNet Media, we help to onboard products like Plum
Yep.
And right, we help employers get past that risk averse nature, and just the pain and the hassle sometimes of attempting to get stuff done. And so your team is great, by the way,
Thank you.
at helping with user adoption and all the onboarding. And we add value on top of that where we can. So okay, I guess next we had Jason Roberts and Craig Luthi from uh, Yeti, and we talked about the sourcing function and how that seems to be changing a little bit. I don't think there are teams of sourcers at uh, companies that much anymore. Am I crazy? I think that's kind of where we got to.
And I've known Jason a long time, and he's fantastic.
Yeah.
And he's one of those people in my mind who is an innovator, who thinks about things differently and kind of bucks the status quo, not just to buck it, but to get good outcomes. And I don't think you're crazy, but there's only a couple ways to get candidates. You go find them,
Mm-hmm.
or they find you, and then there's a whole bunch who don't know who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And if you boil it down, you have the kind of active, passive, and passive candidates. So to me, no different than kind of sales and marketing. If you're a known brand, it's way easier
Sure.
to hire, and not just to hire, but to hire quality people. And what I think is happening in sourcing, and it's just a theory of mine, is for years, employers, and our fault from a technology vendor perspective, we have convinced employers that you have to be fast. Speed matters. But for hundreds of years, we've taught candidates that quality is important. Well, now with AI, candidates have said, well, if you're not using quality, why should I use quality? I'm going to use speed too.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have a race to the bottom because it's all about speed and it's less about quality. And I think as we start looking, because this industry goes through tons of changes, quality is going to become more important on both sides again.
Yeah.
The question is, how do you get quality when there is no even, when everyone can even the playing field in 30 seconds with AI? And I think it's going to change. I don't think it's going to eliminate sourcing. I think it's going to change what sourcing becomes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that's going to be, but it can't just be about speed anymore. It's got to be about, how do I bring the right 10 next people into the company? Because we're moving to a world where productivity is going to be the most important thing. In COVID, it was just mass, right? How do I hire enough people to get the pyramids built? Mm-hmm. Now, to me, if you're focused on productivity as an employer, you better also be focused on quality more than speed.
That's right. Yeah, and we'll get there, right? I mean, we've seen reports that we're shifting back to an employer-centric market. We will get to a point within the next year or so where we are short of candidates again.
Yep.
Right? So that's going to happen. It always does. But right now, we've got too many people applying. And so the sourcing function is a little bit shifting to a matching and screening function. And it's, the flip side of it is the recruitment marketing piece. And sourcers are being asked to do some of that. And this is as we all in our jobs shift towards talent management. So, right, things are changing. We're kind of decimated in our numbers in corporate talent acquisition right now, and doing more with less is kind of the, for lack of a better idea, theme of the year is what we're hearing. And, that's a broad brush to paint with, but that's sort of the numbers we're being given, unfortunately.
But my fear there is the following. We talked to somebody who, for a particular program, they had 50,000 applicants. Okay, that's great. Their TA function has been decimated. So their way to solve that is speed, right? Let's use technology. But when the applicants are also using technology, all 50,000 people are going to look exactly the same.
Yeah.
Because everyone's going to put their job description in ChatGPT and their resume. All 50,000 are going to look exactly the same. So what are you going to do?
Yeah, and so there are very few, I think, very few recruiters that still have the ability to look at a resume and know from their gut and experience that person is a fit.
Agree.
Right. I just don't think that's taught certainly, and we hire lower level people for that role a lot. And nothing against them; they're doing their job, right? They are screening applicants, but at the same time, yeah, assessments are going to come into play more often because AI makes everything the same. And okay, it starts with bad job description, so we can play there all day long. And that's another thing that my team is really good at, making a job description and an application good enough that people can opt in properly. But
It's critical because it's bad data with bad data.
yeah,
And we go back to employer brand. That should be every part of your job description. Should be
yeah,
about why people will hop out of bed every day to come work for you.
that's right. And do those words make sense to the person applying?
Correct.
And if they don't, let's do a better job of helping them and find a role that does match that. All right, we talked about AI a little bit on this day. We had it was pretty fun. Kyle Lagunas was a moderator for a pretty fun panel, and it was kind of practical AI applications in this evolving landscape. And you said it best. AI happened years ago, right? I implemented my first chatbot on a corporate, employer site in 2017. So this is, it's not brand new, but what we're seeing now is more matching technology, and then there's legal considerations around that. And if you're using AI, I just was on another podcast earlier today to discuss for a bunch of legal professionals what that means. You have to, in New York at least, you have to prove every year that any AI technology that you've used to match candidates to jobs has been audited for bias, right? And so, I like that Plum proudly says we don't use AI.
Yeah, it's I have an AI background before here, so
Yeah.
a lot to say. But there's nothing wrong with AI. I don't think is going to dehumanize us. I think AI is, if used correctly, should allow us to be more human. But
Mhm.
what has changed, and what people didn't, you mentioned it perfectly, Craig, because you had budget at an employer, you were able to implement relatively new slash expensive technology.
Mhm.
Right, expensive meaning for me as a candidate. What ChatGPT did was it democratized access to AI to the masses.
Yeah.
So that's where the speed comes in. So when you were, as the employer, when you're holding all the keys to the kingdom for AI, you're in control.
Right.
But when that animal gets out and everyone has access to AI that the world has never seen, that changed everything.
That's right.
You had
Yeah.
the power because you could use it for what you needed, but you were safe because the applicants and the candidates weren't using it. But now they
Mhm.
are. And that's a big problem.
One of my favorite uses for AI in recruiting is taking snippets from an interview and intelligently creating, you know, hot takes, right? And you can do the same with a hiring manager intake. And so Nick from Hone It did a really good job of explaining how that's not matching, that's just helping. And I think
Right.
there are great use cases like that all over the place for AI in our space. And fortunately there are, because almost every vendor now claims to use AI as part of their tech stack. So
And it's different in how we have algorithms that's different than AI, right? Understanding data is one thing, and crunching the numbers is one thing, but
right.
actually the practical use of AI in matching is a very different thing. And it's New York now, it's about to be California, it's about to be a lot of other countries.
Chicago, yeah.
You better get it up to speed, because your choices are, you either have to have it right, pick
Right.
the right vendor, not use AI, right? And there's historically we're an industry that is late to adopt. AI is not a technology that will wait for us.
Correct.
Right? Nor is the legal system.
Yeah.
So we have to do it fast.
And the onus is on the vendors.
Yep.
The vendors have to be audited, and they have to opt in for this, and then they have to pay for a number of licenses that they can give to the employer that says, yeah, we passed this audit. Now, is the audit perfect? No. It's certainly not, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to push on vendors, and I'm sure other vendors are going to hate that I say this. I mean, we're all friends with the same people. Like, we worked with Jerry and Chris and Barb at CXR to help put together.
Yeah.
If you're going to buy Plum helped. If you're going to buy AI, you should ask these questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here's some of the things you should go through. Even though we're not using AI in the sense that you're talking about it, we're the only company that puts out our full scientific manual and putting out our third-party bias audit. Like, right. Somebody may look at that. Now it's pretty darn good, right? It showed no bias. But if somebody has some questions and they don't want to bias, then don't buy it. But I'd rather them be able to make an educated decision on it than to kind of hold that back and do a cup game of we're going to answer your question, but not really answer your question. Read it for yourself, send it to your attorney, send it to legal, compliance, security, whoever. And if they should give you the thumbs up on it.
I think there's not enough of that at the buyer level sometimes. Right? Things get stuck in procurement, and procurement's not reading that.
No.
Right. So somebody has to be in charge, and employers have to either hire outside help or designate someone on your team to read your contracts, read the documentation from the vendor, because very often we buy, we implement, and then we complain because we didn't do all that.
Agree.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say we almost make the companies go through it with us. Mm-hmm. As much as people hate legal, security, compliance, and red lines and all that, it's important. Now, sometimes we have to say no to particular changes and talk about it, but you should know what you're buying.
That's right.
If they don't, like we talked about this, like, we haven't lost an enterprise account in 4 years. So I'd rather have that and sell less accounts and those people be happy and love what they bought than go sell 100 accounts and lose 80 of them in 2 years. Like, that's right. The reputation's too important, the brand's too important, and people should get exactly what they're looking for. And if you can't solve what they're looking for, it's never going to be 100%. Then don't sell it to them. Right.
Yeah. If you can't comfortably write the case study about it, is it worth doing in the first place?
For sure.
Yeah. We did a session on recruiting with TikTok. Now, I would tell you that my first session about recruiting with TikTok was like 4 years ago. And so is that still relevant? Well, I'm going to say that because of Tracy from Flockety, I'm saying yes, because she's done a really cool thing of building an influencer network for employers, which is really cool. So she's won pitch competitions, innovation awards. It's pretty cool.
I'm a big fan of Tracy. I've known Tracy a long time.
Yeah.
She's one of the people we just talked about, right? She's done this, she's done this, she's done this.
Yeah.
The product's fantastic. There's some fear with TikTok unrelated to Tracy, right? Where we're going.
That's right.
If it's not TikTok, it's something else. Like, just like people have complained about what LinkedIn's doing, kind of with access. If it's not LinkedIn, it'll be like, we're an innovative capitalist country. Somebody else will figure something out. It's just the way this. If not, Monster and Career Builder would still be around, right?
Yeah.
I know they're around, but they'd still be around.
Meh.
So,
I'm kidding, Monster and Career Builder.
Yeah. The what I think is actually the canary in the coal mine for what Tracy has built is that generation of people want a different experience than certainly you and me. We're probably similar ages generation, and even the generation below us. Mm-hmm. So the days of I'm going to go to a job board and search for jobs, I think are not the job boards are going away. I don't mean it that way. They need to adapt.
Yeah.
But that generation almost wants to be told what to do. And I don't mean in an over demanding world. Like, here's who I am. Here's what I know. Here's what I'm good at. Just tell me the 3 things I should look at. Mm-hmm. It's built their entire life. Their whole life is about messaging from a marketing perspective, here's the 3 things we think you should buy on Amazon. Here's the 3 vacations you should go on. And most of the time they're picking one of those 3 things. So why are they going to be thrown 10,000 jobs that they have to use sliders to bring down to say, hey, maybe I'm a good fit here. They just want to be told what's good for them. And in what Tracy's building, it's has built, it's really justified that. I do think the next generation is going to want, call it a co-pilot. They're just going to want something to be with them that helps them in the decisions that they're going to make about their career.
Right. Yeah. And in some way, Jason, we will get to a point where everyone isn't applying for everything all at once.
Yes.
And right. And there will be a confluence where things right size and we're back in good shape, I think. All right. We talked a little bit about personal brand and employer brand, and I'm a big advocate of this topic because I like employee advocacy, but I think at the recruiter level and at the even the HR leadership level, we're sort of public facing people for the organization, and we're the first line for job seekers for sure, and we need to set the tone for the organization, and kind of we're public people whether we want to be or not in that role. And so we had a pretty good little session on that. And we had a very reluctant Kevin Cooksey from Whole Foods, who is no longer very public, yet he does recruitment marketing for Whole Foods. So he had some fun takes on that.
If we were running a sales organization who are the first touch for potential customers, or somebody on your CS team, they were a nightmare on the phone, would we keep that person? The answer is no. And it's no different in recruiting. Right. I think there's kind of two schools of thought of, I'm here to recruit, but that position really is the first step onto the beach. And I think there needs to be either a product or training to where, not that it's media training, but how do you coach to make it so exciting that it's a company to come work for? And how do you get people to culturally live and breathe the brand? The downside is recruiters get crapped on so often at organizations. I don't think a lot of them believe that. So if you're an organization, you better make sure your frontline salespeople, your frontline CS people, and your frontline recruiters are living and breathing that company mission, or get them there. Because if not, the people they're either going to scare people away, or they're going to bring in people who are not going to believe the mission because they weren't sold it on the front end.
Yeah, it's a delicate line. It's a tough sell sometimes when companies have multiple layoffs, and so you have to do some mission training. I 100% agree with that. And
Craig, that's something you can do. There you
go. I do. We've just recently done it for some really great organizations. So I love that. I love that idea and that topic. Mission training is important, and it goes right to your core values. And what do we do with those core values once we write them?
But I think culture is also broken. And I know culture is an overloaded word. There's what the 4 or 50-year-old white dudes sitting in an office think culture is and should be. But then there's what people actually who are working there think it is. Yeah. But also what they think it should be. Those are 3 different points of view. And yet the 4 dudes sit in the office say, hey, here's our culture. But if you were to ask all your employees, they're going to tell you what the culture is today. Yeah. It may be different than yours, but they're also going to tell you what it should be. And ultimately, this top-down approach to anything isn't going to work anymore. It's really a bottoms-up approach. So if 80% of your employees think the culture should be this, you need to change your mind at the executive level, because you're not going to fire 80% of your company. You're wrong. Understand what your gaps are, and then bring it back to where you need it to be.
When we do those interviews for employer brand, mission statements, and core values, we have to interview people at all levels of the organization. We have to interview advocates and those that maybe are not satisfied right now. But almost every time, the managers and leaders are surprised by some of the things that their frontline workers think the company's really good at, and are really good about the organization. So I couldn't agree with you more there.
I think it's a CEO problem. I mean, if I think about it as a senior leader, but also as a CEO, your job is a fiduciary responsibility, right?
That's right.
Having enough money, making sure you're doing profits, all the things, making sure your people are taken care of, but also your culture. To me, those are the 3 main things. Taking care of is lots of things. Can you upskill your people? Do they have a career path? Is it safe? right?
Mhm.
All those no things. But like culture is a top 3 thing for a CEO. And if it's not, you have the wrong CEO. But because companies are big, you may have a great CEO who says our culture should be this, but if it's not being implemented or the people don't think that's the right culture, that's not your culture. You have to
That's right.
fix it. You have to fix it.
Yeah, and there's some relevant statistics around the tenure of a CEO, right? And those that will be at an organization more than 5 years are really more about culture
Mm-hmm.
than those who aren't. And I blame private equity. I blame and and I'm an advocate of all these things as well, right? But we go into funding an organization with a mindset that there's going to be turnaround and ROI within X number of years, and we don't put culture at the front of that equation.
Yeah, and it becomes a math game. And again, I have a lot of experience in selling companies and VCs and PEs and all that.
Yeah.
But if I'm in a VC office, I'd rather a company grow at 50% a year for the next 10 years than 100% this year and 2% next year because they had to change their CEO. I mean, if you think of Caitlin, who's our CEO, we're 11 years old. She's been here. She's the founder.
Yeah.
Right. Because she put people and culture first. We're still growing. We're doing really well. Could we, if we change the culture and burn the ships, could we grow more? Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Is it worth it? No, it's not. Because we're doing great.
Yeah. And I, well, I couldn't agree more. Two of our final presentations of the day were a little culture specific. The second to the last was a conversation about diversity and inclusion with me and Erica Oliver from Horsefly. She is a Black woman and part Native American, and I am a white man and a card-carrying Cherokee Indian. And so we had this kind of sort of real discussion about, what's happening with our diversity efforts. Those departments are being decimated right now, right? It's like as soon as the money goes, talent acquisition and diversity groups get slashed. How is that good for the organization? And then what are we really doing with all the progress that we made? Did it make a difference? Does it really help? And the audience was as much of a speaker in this one as Erica and I were. And it was a very heartfelt conversation. And that's a culture thing too, I think.
Yeah, I was at a dinner kind of right around the time where affirmative action happened. And Jerry was talking, Crispin was talking about it, that this was going to happen, right? And he's not wrong, right? Like, I think this is a direct outcropping. But his other point was just as interesting, and that's part of it. But the other part of it is when things are going really well, you hire chief culture officers and chief experience officers and DE,
That's right.
Right? And when things are bad, companies make a decision to like cut quote unquote fat.
Yeah.
Now you and I are making the argument like that's the last thing you should cut.
Yeah.
But until there's enough outspoken CEOs who are going to buck the system and say, I'm going to put culture first, I'm going to put DE&I first, right? Not over profits. If you do it right, it should make you a better, more profitable company. If I'm wearing the shirt and the sign, right? If people are flourishing at your company, which means they're matched to roles, they're happy, they're surrounded by people who are different than them that they can learn from. If they're flourishing, the business will thrive. But there's this old school mentality that if we just beat the crap out of people and I hire people based on a particular pattern and we, the beatings will continue until profits go up. And then they kind of go up because the market goes up and they go, oh, I was right. But the right way to build a company is putting the people first, looking at culture, looking at diversity, and having a big diverse of not just culture, but thought. Mm-hmm. If I had everybody exactly the same, sure, if I handed them something, the exact same thing would come out, but we would never innovate. We would never grow. So again, like everything, I do think it starts at the top. And there are plenty of CEOs out there who do believe this. And you can look at companies who are successful and point to that is why they're successful. But the rank and file feel frustrated because they make a big deal that they brought in this person to run diversity. 6 months later, they fire that person.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, well, then why the hell did we even do it?
Yeah. Yeah. And it feels like wasted effort, but I'm going to say that it's not. I mean, there was progress made in some organizations that wouldn't have been made otherwise.
I agree.
Many of us in our own organizations received, inclusivity training and bias training and things like that we would have never received in the first place had we not gone down that road. I do think it's a shame, a travesty maybe, that the affirmative action ban has played a part in kind of slashing that effort, but it'll come back, and there's already pushback. We're already hearing it and feeling it. So yeah, we'll get back to a good place there, I think. Our final session was about mental health, and it was Chris Allen and Maren Hogan. And Chris Allen is a growth leader for AMS, right, the big RPO, and he sort of admitted to the audience, and maybe for the first time publicly, that he suffers from some mental health issues, or that he's been feeling like he has, and it was tearful, and he said that he finally got to a point where he said to his boss that he's really struggling, and wisely, he doesn't think because of any training or anything else. His boss said to him, "Do you want to talk about it?" And it was a real breakthrough for him. He didn't think that companies would act like that. This one did, in this situation anyway. And Maren brought up a story about when one of her children was depressed and had to be medicated. And, there's a few years ago, 2016, where you couldn't really talk about that for fear of pushback. Oh, we're over medicating. Everybody's depressed. It's not real. ADHD is not a thing. And I think fast forward, we find that, yeah, there are real things. I mean, we've been through some trauma in this country and globally, and we know that some of these things are real. And so as we kind of progress to this companies want everyone to come back to work state of being, right? We just had Dell, I think, say that, yeah, you can work remotely, but you're not going to get promoted. Told their workers this, right? And so that's a daunting thing. And we've made all these decisions about our lives based on the fact that we were told we could be remote. And so, we as employers need to be cognizant of what people are going through. And it starts at the, individual level. How do I talk to you, Jason, about what's going on with you and anyone that works with me or for me or around me? And I think that, if we all take that attitude, it's going to be very difficult for companies to mandate that you are open to talking about mental health with everybody you work with.
I have a lot to say about this. It's not a new thing, mental health or taking care of your, like, I have a child with special needs, right? So I understand this really well, at least from the human impact on it.
Yeah.
A company is not a person. Right? Coca-Cola is not a person. Dell's not a person. There are people at a company, and ultimately the CEO is in charge of that company or the board or whatever. But Chris's example was great because he just talked to another human being who gave a crap. That's literally what it was. And I think that is changing. I think COVID has brought that forward pretty drastically, that people now have the courage to bring it up, and there is enough training and enough empathy to be able to respond to it as a human, not as their boss or as their peer.
Yeah.
My philosophy has always been, and I've had negative experiences with what I'm about to say. People on my team, I want them to be exactly who they are at home, as who they are at work. But that's not how we were trained in our life, right? You put up this facade, you put up this persona. If you're in sales, you need to be this way. If you're a CFO, right? You never talk about, you never show weakness to some extent. Well, it only takes a couple of times when a single mom works for you that, I need to work from home. No, your kid's sick. Just take the day off.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, have that open, honest, and transparent conversation. Just be the same person you are at work as you are at home. The problem is if you have somebody who's not willing to accept that and still does the old school way of, this is the way we do it, and you have to do it this way. Because we're, at least in the States, we're in this capitalist society, it's going to right itself.
Mm-hmm.
Dell's turnover is going to be massive.
Yeah.
And who's going to benefit from that? Companies who are going to look at it in a capitalist way and say, I can take 100 of Dell's top engineers, who are some of the best in the world, and if all I do is let them be remote, they can come work for my company. Maybe I'm a 20-person startup. Right. I could never get that person before. So I think it has a right way of resizing itself. When our generation's not in the workforce anymore, I think it's generationally going to start taking more care of itself over time, because I think the younger generations will refuse to work for a company like we put a fake mask on, you and I, Craig, at our age, starting out. We went out and said, hey, I'll just, I'll swallow my pride, I'll bite my lip, and I'll go do it. I don't think that the generation who's coming into the workforce now, who has been in there for 5 years, is willing to take it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's going to be fascinating how this plays out. I mean, I'm watching. I am taking notes. I'm very interested in how this works out. I'm a fan of Dell. Right, they've sponsored our conference in the past, and they are big supporters of TalentNet. And I know that the people who come to TalentNet and are part of that are not making those decisions. But so I feel for them, and I feel for well. It's just going to be fascinating to see how this works out. And in fact, my next call, Jason, you'll love this, is with Megan McCarthy and Carrie Corcoran, who both have done their time with TalentNet Media, working on our projects. And we are recording the first episode of the Hiring Humans podcast, which is all about mental health and wellness in this age where half the people we know are unemployed and getting ghosted left and right.
Which is ridiculous.
Right. Incredible. So that's going to be fun to see. I'll make sure you get a copy of that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and thank you for being here today. It was a fantastic event. We're going to do it again in December, and we're excited to have Plum as a partner. And it's always good to get to work with you.
Likewise, appreciate it so much, and thanks for everyone for being there, and thanks for all the support. We appreciate you.